Thanks again for staying with us on your ultimate news and current affairs program on television, TMI Monday. Just about time to look at some very interesting economic analysis of the Nigerian's economy, some analysis of the Nigerian's economy. Let's take it back to 2019 through 2020, and then of course 2021. In 2019, these were the exchange rates. Based on the top three economies in Africa, Egypt was in third position with a net asset of $302.3 billion. And South Africa, the second largest economy, with $387.8 billion. And Nigeria, the biggest economy at the time, with $448.1 billion. And then in 2020, South Africa remained third, $335.3 billion. Egypt, $364 billion. Nigeria, $429.4 billion. In 2021, Nigeria in the top position with $441.5 billion. South Africa, $418 billion. Egypt, $402.8 billion. Interface this with what used to obtain in the past and then in the present. Do an interface. You find that as of 29th of March 2022, the exchange rates were £1 to 783 naira, a dollar 560, and a pound 670. And now, to 2 years ago, precisely on the 1st of March 1980, the exchange rate was $1 to 0.78 kobo. All right, and that shouldn't surprise you. That was the reality. But all of this has since nosedived, and as people are coming forward to say they want to be the next president to take over from President Muhammadu Buhari, what are they putting on the table? What is their take? What is their strategy? What is their structure to change the narrative about our economy? We're bringing on board two of our in-house analysts, regular analysts, economic analysts here on some of our current affairs program. Destiny Owabu. Destiny, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
And of course, Dr. Osaze Iyoha. Dr. Osaze, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, now, gentlemen, help us make sense of where we are coming from, where we are, and where we are going. There were days where the naira was literally higher than the pounds or the dollar or at par. All of those days are gone.
Yeah.
So what was happening then that we had those glory days of the naira higher than the dollar or at par with the dollar or higher than the pound or at par with the pound? In fact, many of the currencies that are higher than Nigeria today in Africa and other climes, they were far off. They were just far behind us.
Yeah.
Yes, talk to me.
So first of all, the system of exchange rate we were operating then was the fixed exchange rate system, and which required us to peg a currency, our currency, to the dollar or to any other currency. And so the value you saw as at that time was not reflective of the strength of our economy.
Really?
It wasn't. So, but around that period too, Nigeria was suffering a lot of economic problems. And so the federal government thought in its wisdom to institute what we call the Structural Adjustment Program. And one of the stipulations of that program was that we should liberalize our foreign exchange. Because we're owing a lot, we're not earning a lot of money, and the economy was going through austerity period. So we decided to, we were advised that to have a realistic exchange rate, we must liberalize. So that was done as a fallout of the SAP program.
Okay.
And then since then, the exchange rate began to float. Because we have two major regimes. We have the fixed exchange rate system, then we have the floating exchange rate system. It began to float according to market forces and some other variables. So that's what simply happened. That quickly led to massive depreciation of the currency over a period of time. And then given other fundamentals too, this is about 40 years down the period. And then we have seen that the exchange rate has become worse and worse and worse with time. It simply reflects that our economy wasn't fundamentally sound to generate a healthy exchange rate system.
Okay. Yeah. All right, Dr. Saze, Yeah, there were times that, back in the days where Nigeria was literally a production hub. Yeah. Many of the things we were using were made locally. Yeah. Tires, we had cars being assembled here and a whole lot of things. Yeah. How were those things relevant? Were they relevant to this exchange rate?
Yeah, it was. It's very important that we are bringing this to the fore now, especially with our elections coming, because it's said that when you have bad economics, bad economy doesn't necessarily lead to bad politics. Okay. But when you have bad politics, it always leads to a bad economy. You understand? So it's important. We have been interrogating the politics, but it's important because what affects the masses is the economy, not necessarily the politician or where he's from. Most of the narrative has been going around, is he from the north, is he from the south? So what affects the poor man is inflation. It's unemployment. So we should look out for that. I like the point you brought about exchange rate in the 80s. It's important to state that production was the difference between then and now. Exchange rate in 1980, I was checking through, was 78 kobo to $1. Yeah. So it means our currency was stronger. Yeah. Why? It's simple, because of production. We're producing almost everything, just as you said, almost everything that we used. We had Leonards. I said this on a sister program on your station here. We had Leonards that were producing our shoes, and Bata producing our shoes. We were producing our food, beans, cocoa, everything, almost everything. We were self-sufficient in food, at least to a very large extent. Look at Russia. They've been doling out different sanctions at them. It's still a strong economy because they are self-sufficient. 85% of their food needs comes from within. So that's where, but when you are an economy that is open, you import everything. We had Pan and Volkswagen. Volkswagen was in Lagos, Pan was in Kaduna. So 80% of the cars were either, remember then you had our father say that if you are not buying Peugeot, you are buying Volkswagen. You had, and these plants were not just assembly plants, they were producing. There was a Vono product in Ibadan that were making the chairs. They had Ferondo Limited in Ibadan making the brake pads, and so there was Isoglass in Ibadan making the windshields. So you had Michelin and Dunlop were here. Michelin was in Lagos, Dunlop was in Port Harcourt. They were producing the tires. So almost everything was literally coming from within. We had Nigerian Airways flying us around. There was one Quali Pipe in Kano producing our pipes. We had Nigerian Cable and Nigerian Cable Company making our wire. So almost everything was self-sufficient. So we were not just only saving forex, we were making forex. We had our 3 refineries working at full capacity. Port Harcourt refinery was built in 1977, Warri was built in 1979, Kaduna in 1980, at full capacity. We were producing, we were making foreign, we were getting foreign. In 1980, our GDP was 2.9%. GDP growth. 1981, it was 20.8%. We have never had it since any time before and after. 77, it's 8.3%. 76, 7. So we had very, very impressive growth rates, and it's because of production. We can go around and analyze the economy. And I was saying that any presidential candidate who is coming to campaign to us, we really don't want to hear security, as good as that is. We don't want to hear security, corruption. Production is the way to go. When there's production, generally, inflation will come down. Why are we having inflation? Because we are nearly importing almost everything we need. So we have good production, there's employment, purchasing power is high, and that would definitely draw down inflation. Most of the things we import today, we are going through literally imported inflation. You have countries like Belgium on already 15% inflation. UK, the last inflation figures came out at 9%. US, they are 40-year high, record high, 8.5%. What are you doing? You are importing goods from those countries that are suffering inflation, and you are bringing it to your country with an imposed inflation already. Then we now come and add our 15.92% inflation. Then the businessman considers everything that costs, the customs, that's another kettle of fish altogether. Yeah. The undoings are the customs. That even the World Bank has said that port efficiency, we are 183 out of 185 countries. They add all those 2 months that he has to pay demurrage, puts his profit. So we can't run away from that inflation. So production, I've always said, you know, the Nigerian economy is like an onion. You know, you peel one skin, you are fighting another. You thought you solved this problem, you are peeling another one. Yeah, but the magic bullet has to be production. Until we start producing, we'll just be going around in circle. Look at China. I was looking at their figures. 65% of contribution to GDP comes from this, and it's the small, medium-scale enterprises that we have to push on. I was looking at it. There was a time when you drive by the road, you see as many as 3, 4, 5, 6 welders on the road. Now, in fact, from my area, I drive about 45 minutes. There was a welder by my junction, one by the other. They've all vanished. Why? Because of power. And that's the problem. The Nigerian power, we've thrown billions and trillions of naira into the power system. It still has. Egypt just spent 10 billion naira, $10 billion through Siemens. And they have doubled their megawatts from 28 megawatts to 55 megawatts. Wow. And South Africa has 40,000 megawatts. Algeria about 50,000. We are struggling between 3 and 4 megawatts. Whenever we go beyond 3.5, the national grid collapses because the TCN, the transmission networks can't take beyond 3.5 and 4. So power has to be the way to go. Small and medium-scale enterprises have to be encouraged, because they are the drivers of growth anywhere. In China, they contribute 65% to GDP, 65% to employment, 65% to national GDP growth. So we have to focus on production.
Okay. Production. Let me pause it there for a moment. Get Destiny here. Destiny, these are mind-blowing.
Yeah, of course.
And well, we had it so good back in the days. I can't recall that angels came from heaven to get these things done. Human beings did it. So how come we've not been able to reproduce this over the years, particularly with the oil boom? We know countries, in the world, through the oil boom, they've been able to turn their economies around. I mean, even states and cities. Dubai is not a country, to the best of my knowledge, but we are aware of what they've been able to do with oil money. Why has the Nigerian case been so different?
One thing is missing in all the analysis. These companies we talked about, they were run by Westerners. We inherited most of these companies from Western models. We forgot that the British people were in charge of this economy for so many years. When we got independence, the next crop of people were the best trained Nigerians that could handle it. As each generation went away from the British colonial era, we started having people who were incompetent. Most of the organizations established by the Nigerian government around that period all failed by the time we got to the 90s. Because one, people must understand how to manage systems, sustainable systems. Something seriously lacking in this part of the world. All the manufacturing is highly capital intensive and requires a lot of technology. And you can't manage such a thing in a country where people are not, they are mainly singers and dancers. Nigerians are very good at singing and dancing, but we are not good at managing corporations that are run by technological systems. He talked about the PAN. All of them folded up. All the companies, manufacturing companies folded up. What we have is mini kiosks around Nigeria. We don't have corporations. And like I said, corporations do better than small kiosks. If you look at the total advantage to the economy. Although small and medium scale enterprises are the biggest employers, but when it comes to impact on GDP, big corporations tend to deliver more value in that area. Okay, so that is where we miss it. The missing link there is we have lost the capacity to run mega systems like the way we inherited it from the British and others. Okay, once that component is missing, then what we have is we just have two types of people in this country that make money: rent seekers, politicians, and others, and people who simply circulate, merchandisers. Those are the only two. The middle point of the economy, where we have the linkage effects, is totally missing. Manufacturing and industrial development is near dead. The contribution of manufacturing to our GDP is not up to exchange is not up to 1%. To GDP is not up to 10%. So you can imagine the gap. There's a major gap between the primary and the tertiary sector. That manufacturing part is totally dead. And why? It requires these 4 skills: STEM education. We don't have a local engineering industry. We don't have a fabrication industry. We don't have. When you think about the value chain of manufacturing industry, that is where the bulk of the money is. I'll give you an example. Look at a car, for instance. It takes about 600 jobs to make a car. So let's
600 jobs
to make a car. I mean, 600 small components to make a car. Now, let's forget about the car. Nigeria does not have technology to do a big car, for instance. But what about the tires? What about the brakes? Some countries only make brakes.
And they export them.
They export them. What about the glass? What about small components inside the car? That's what we call local engineering. So we may actually have business with Toyota, for instance, and yet we are not, most of the parts are made locally. Okay, so you can have patents, bad patents, and manufacture these things. What happened to our manufacturing? And like I said, what are you going to export to the developed world? What the only thing we export is primary products. So like I said, our economy is connected to oil. And once anything happens to the oil industry, we are down. But this is where the money is. What happened to our steel? What happens to our manufacturing? What happens to, I mean, just check our import bill alone. You see the problem with this country. Somebody said the other day, even toothpicks, we import it. Fish, everything in this country. A typical Nigerian is wearing at least 10 countries anytime he dresses. You can imagine that. A typical Nigerian, if you just look at the way you are dressed right now, I can mention 10 countries you are putting on right now. That's the problem of this country. So he was right and said, production. Just check from your ring to your wristwatch to your shoes. You are wearing 10 countries right now. I'm wearing another 5, 6, 7 countries. You know, we are surrounded by 80, 50 countries. Where is the Nigerian component inside? So we like I said, we are not ready for production. And there are only two things you can do to develop a country to solve these foreign exchange problems. The first thing is what we call productivity, raising the productivity of people, not production just mainly. Nigerians produce, but what is the value of that production? That's the question. Okay, the production of a pilot and the production of a person selling recharge card are not the same. They are both producing, but one is generating high returns per input put into production. So how many Nigerians have the skills? If you take 100 Nigerians, how many of them have skills that can generate billions of naira or that can create a lot of output for this country? You would write some figures just now. So somebody who's not an economist will think those figures they say Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa. It is totally nonsense. It's useless when you consider what
the reality.
No, because it's not even that's just measuring the size of the economy.
Yes.
The population of South Africa is no more than 50 million. Nigeria is 206 million. So by the time you divide it and get what you call your income per head, Nigeria is just barely $2,500 per head. While South Africa is about $8,000. So the total is not the value. That's the absolute value. We're looking at relative values. Okay. Population, GDP over population. South Africa is number 1, far ahead of Nigeria. In fact, Nigeria is around number 9, number 10 in Africa when you look at that. And so if we talked about power generation just now. Anytime you compare Nigeria with other countries, on power generation, we cannot generate more than 6,000 megawatts in 60 years. South Africa generates over 50,000 megawatts. So where do we start from? Like I said, we need to realign. We need a visionary leader. The Nigerian question will be a recurring decimal until we get these three things right. I always say that number 1, bold leadership, not just filling up offices. The crop of leaders we have now, painfully, are totally redundant to the progress of this country. I must tell you, I don't want to offend people, but look at we don't have bold leaders. We don't have tall visions. If you go to Rwanda, look at what other countries are doing. They are cutting the West. They are cutting the West strategically. Yeah. You know, for a country of our size and our population growth rate, we should be taking bold decisions, very big decisions, not discussing politics and things. We should look for a leader that's an economist, or even if not an economist, but a businessman, a person who understands the challenges that we face. Okay. You know, we need to get beyond basic production into real production. Okay, that's what the problem is. And if we don't get the production right, these exchange issues, it's like there's fire here, we are dealing with the smoke. We're always dealing with the smoke of the issues. What determines the value of your exchange rate is your productivity. Basically, that's the essence. But then we start looking at what we call, like we are doing managed float now. We are trying to to correct something that's already bad. Whereas the problem is hard decisions. Yeah. What are we producing? What happened to cars? What happened to computers? What happens to shoes? What happens to suits like this? Why is Nigeria not the hub of suits? How can we be wearing suits in this country? Yeah, we are not a hub. Why is Nigeria not the biggest producer of cell phones in Africa? Why is Nigeria not the biggest producer of wires in Africa? Why is Nigeria not the biggest producer of rice or other products in Africa? Those kind of things are what generates a lot of income that powers into the foreign exchange. Okay, so let me just put it in the simple way. What this simply means is, if it is 560 something naira to a dollar, it simply means that Americans only require the dollar, the naira once, when we require the dollar 500 and something times.
Crazy.
That's what it simply means. It's crazy. Yeah. There is no need for us to have that connection if we were producing. In fact, most people believe that having the 565 to $1 is not the problem. It's not the problem. Japan exchange rate to America is large on paper. It's even large. But that's not the problem. The problem is the importation. If you are insulated from the world in terms of production, you're able to produce most of what you consume. Let the exchange rate be 1 naira to 2,000 naira to $1.
Yeah.
That's on paper. The fact that we are not importing a lot from these countries will not do anything. It's not the number we're looking. It's not the absolute value. It's the fact that we import practically everything that we use. Okay? If that problem is not solved by getting to work and producing the things that we consume, this country, we are simply discussing these things. We keep discussing them for the next 25 years.
All right, Dr. Saze, I thought that, like we've seen in other times, the oil boom was a major turning point for many countries. In the case of Nigeria, the reverse is the case. What can be done in that direction? I'm coming to the political side because that's really the crux of our conversation today. But I just wanted to establish this foundation. Yeah.
Yeah, very briefly. It's very simple. And it baffles everybody. In 2021, last year, our budget benchmark for oil was $40 per barrel. We averaged $79 per barrel. So it means we had an excess of $39 per barrel. So we were supposed to even be comfortable because our budget was $40. We averaged $79. So meanwhile, during that period, our ECA, our excess crude account, fell in January 2021 from $78 million to $35 million in January 2022. So that means we did above our benchmark, and yet our economic crude, excess crude account fell instead of increasing. Our forex reserve dropped from about $40.52 billion to now about 30. So now we are selling oil at over 100. It also goes to many. Most times I don't like to bring politics into it, but we might just be scratching the surface if we fail to talk about it. And that's where sometimes we talk about demand push inflation, cost push inflation, which we see Nigeria is currently going through. We also might also want to talk of corruption push inflation or theft push inflation, because that's what we're almost going through. You look at our budget. The budget is 17 trillion naira for the budget. We are told that we have a deficit. We are working with a fiscal deficit of 7.5 trillion. Yeah. So we are expecting 10 trillion. But in the last 5 years, we haven't gone beyond 6 trillion as internally generated revenue. Last year, it was 5.5 trillion. The Minister of Finance says our salary, the federal civil service, the salary is 321 billion a month. In a year, that's 3.8 trillion. So if we say we get 6 trillion revenue, 3.8 minus 6 trillion leaves us with 3 trillion. We have debt servicing, 4.2 trillion. And that has to be done there. So that means that's taking the balance when you do salary. Generated. Then we have subsidy payments, 4.2 trillion. So now we've only left revenue generated. We are going into. Then we are told that customs is losing 800 billion every month from things like undervaluation and so on. Why? Because we don't have scanners at the ports that does all the. A scanner would scan 400 containers in a day. But we are doing manual scanning at 20 containers a day because you have to bring everything out. A scanner just scans a 20-feet container in 35 seconds, a 40-feet container in 55 seconds. But we are profiting from that manual because you can just do the importer how far. Waiting daily container, you will say it's 5 billion. Meanwhile, the actual value is about 10 billion. Okay, 5 billion, okay, how far? You take no the right and 3 billion. It gives you 1 billion out of it. So we are undervalued, we are ripping the country. The Lagos Chamber of Commerce said that 800 billion is lost every month to sharp practices at the port, and 9.6 trillion in a year. So what's our fiscal deficit? 7.5 trillion. So it means if that 9.6 was plugged, so we didn't need to borrow. That's what it means. Oil theft, they say, is 80% of our oil has been stolen. And sometimes it's hard when we hear our leaders coming to complain to us. So what are you telling us now, that we should come and help you? It's 80% of your oil has been stolen. We have a capacity to generate, to produce 2.1 million barrels per day. OPEC slashed it to 1.7 trillion. So we should even be feeling pain that they slashed it, but we have not been able to go beyond 1.2.
So even meet up that production.
In fact, December it was 1.19 trillion in December. So we've not even been able to, and they are telling us that even of that, 80% is being stolen. NNPC could not remit to the consolidated revenue fund account 3 months last year. So you see that we are just, when we are borrowing, that's the painful part of it. We are in about, our public debt now is about 40 trillion naira. We are not talking about what we call ways and means. The last MPC meeting that was held, the CBN said the federal government is owing 18 trillion naira. We have not calculated that. So when you add that into it, it's about 58. Ways and means, that's from printing currency. So they've been printing currency and giving the federal government to plug in fiscal deficit. And the rule says that you must not give beyond 5% of the previous internally generated revenue of government in the previous year. And World Bank report last month said that the government, CBN has been giving government, the federal government above 80%. So we have broken that rule. 5%, we've smashed the rule. In January, the government also bought 704 billion from the CBN. So what this is doing is that funds that the private sector can access, that's what we call crowding out effect in economics. So we are crowding the private sector out, who are the best managers of the economy. So government, we have 14 trillion naira as money supply, money in circulation. Out of the 40 trillion, government is owing 18 trillion. That's about 40%. So government has ambushed 18 trillion out of the 40 trillion. So we have crowded out the private, just simple term, crowding out. We've crowded out the private sector, who will be able to manage these resources more efficiently. Small and medium scale enterprises, the CBN said we loaned 30 trillion, our total lendings last year, and that 5% was given to SMEs, which I even doubt is not even up to. So if you cannot give as much as 30%, in China it's 30%, to your small and medium scale enterprises, they are faced with so much. They are faced with tax, they are faced with power. I've said it so many times. If you fix power, 80% of Nigeria's problems will be solved. 80% of Nigerians are not lazy. 80% will be solved straight. But we have a conspiracy, as he said. We have leaders who, I don't know, I've forgotten the term he used, but it's that bad. We have a presidential aspirant, I will not call him, who it is said, and has not denied it, that is the sole importer or sole representative of Meccano generators in the country. So you vote that kind of person as your president. Will he want to start his business? He won't.
And you think power will be stabilized?
That's what I'm saying. He is the sole. In fact, the National Assembly tried to probe it sometime 2 years ago, and there were means to just douse it. So someone who is the sole importer of Meccano generators, he's not going to fix your power. So I think those are the things we are supposed to be interrogating. We are accumulating debts. Our debt is just blossoming. So you talked about why we are selling above $100 and we are still, they tell us that it's because of the subsidy. That's what they told us. That because.
But do you agree with that as an economist?
Yes, I agree that they are subsidizing. That's the basic truth. In US, the current price for the per liter, they call it per gallon, is about $3.2 right now. In Ghana, it's about, converted to now, it's about 600 naira per liter. In UK, it's about 1.3 pounds per liter. So we are really feeling the benefit of the subsidy. But I still insist that there's so much corruption in the subsidy system. And as we said the last time, we want transparency in this system. Tell us how much the landing cost is. Tell us how much the international crude of oil is. And don't just throw figures at us. Okay. Because if it was not so, we had, this subsidies regime didn't start from today. So that's why I'm not really comfortable when we try to bring, that president was better, this president was, no, that's not true. Each person, the former minister of petroleum in the last administration is some of the richest woman in the world today. From how? Because of the subsidy. There's so much corruption in the subsidy. But the reason is very straightforward to the point why they said we are not benefiting at 100, that the subsidy regime has gone up. So subsidy you sell oil at $100 per barrel, you import at probably, according to them, about 300 naira per liter. So that's the reason they give. But I still insist that there's problem in the subsidy system.
All right. There's a part of the conversation that is very interesting to me. I've heard one of the presidential aspirants talked about how he was able to save a lot for his state, a former governor, saved a lot for his state All he needed to do was to be very, very radical in his approach to reducing cost of governance.
Yeah.
How does that factor into a conversation like this as we look at the Nigerian economy ahead of 2023 elections?
Yeah, it does. It does a lot. If you read the book, How Nations Fail, we have two types of government. We have criminally empowered government, which we call extractive government. And then we have governments that care about their people, that make it easy for businesses to thrive. Now check every government institution in this country. You will see that our government is legalizing illegality. It is created to criminally suck the people dry. Look at every aspect. If you have any government official that is supposed to be doing regulation, go and check. Instead of doing the regulation they ask them to do, they'll be more interested in the revenue generating capacity of their agency. That means the only way we assess government is how much they're able to take from the people. So check the oil sector, check every sector in this country. Why will NNPC not have money to remit? Because it is an entity to suck the country dry. Our politics itself is to suck the people dry. Everything we do, the cost of governance in Nigeria is one of the highest in the world. You know, that governor you talked about was talking about buying about 15, 16 cars for a governor every 3 months, every 6 months. And you can imagine what is going on. So if you check up to the amount they spend to buy presidential tickets, you are going to ask a question. For somebody to put that money up and say, for you to express your interest, you have to pay this amount. It shows that our government is a big business for a few people who knows how to run around the system. If we want this country to develop, we must deal with that problem. See, there are no shortage of theories, of ideas to solve this country's problem. Like he said, if the people in charge, the politics is different from the economics. If the politics is a politics of beerizing and suyarizing, going to power and sucking the government, then nothing will work in this country. So, like I said, even when we discovered oil, a lot of people were happy that Nigeria is going to do well. There's something called the resource curse or the Dutch disease, which says that when countries that are blessed with natural resources tend to become poorer over time. And Nigeria is a classic case of that. With all the billions we have generated from the oil industry, that was enough to develop the country. But there's a problem. Money gotten easy by people who are not very educated, who do not understand people, how to develop a society. They spend it. Go all over the world and see the biggest houses. They are owned by our politicians. Just see what they do. And then they just, because the white man likes to talk figures and put paper, they also present those papers to us and we begin to analyze it. Whereas it's not the papers that drive this economy. What drives this economy is political decisions taken in beer parlors, where they share this money, they do whatever they like with it. Somebody steals billions and does not go to jail. Do you understand? Because of that, everybody goes to power, does the same thing. The small resources we have, when you hear those big figures, you think they are very big. They are not very big. The budget of Nigeria is just $45 billion. American budget is about $6 trillion. The budget of the US. The budget of South Africa is about $55 billion. South Africa has more budget than Nigeria, and it's a smaller country. So that's small that we also have on paper. What are we doing with it? We steal almost all the best part of it. We steal it, and it's painful. We must say the truth. There's an elephant in the room we are not addressing. The corruption of the Nigerian government is bleeding this country. Those figures that you see they throw around, they are the remnants of what is stolen. The total money that flows in this economy is a serious amount of money, but politicians are not dealing with the problem. Okay, like I said, we must take our economy away from these politicians and hand it over to the private sector. That's what he was saying just now. It's the private sector that generates real wealth. The kind of wealth we generate from the government is what we call is palliative kind of wealth, where government just simply rotates money. If you check the developed countries, the richest people in the world are not politicians. Only in Nigeria do you find politicians that are very rich. Okay, check the world, check the United States of America, check the first 400 billionaires. You will not see a politician inside. First 400 billionaires. Why? Because businessmen they work on best practices, they're interested in profit, they manage costs, they don't give room for such leakages. But in politics, we have what we call the moral hazard problem, where you steal money and nobody's responsible for it. Most people feel that stealing government money is not anybody's money.
It's a way of life.
It's a way of life, and it's not our money. Is it not? Whose money is it?
It's our money.
It's our money.
So if I get it and I take a chunk,
yes, I'm entitled to it. So that's how we get. In developed countries, politics is a religion with a set of values. They have some. Politics is more righteous than religion in some countries. That is why you see a politician will resign when there's a failure, when his ministry fails or something. They see it as there is a set of values that run politics. As a public official, you cannot be seen stealing, you cannot be seen being negligent. You must take responsibility for your actions. But here we don't see politics like that. We see it as an office where you collect and make a lot of money. Ask anybody from the small local government chairman to the councillor and everybody. Once you become a political appointee, people in your village will do party because they know that there's a largesse that is coming with that office. Until we change this orientation, the way the typical Nigerian views power and the way he sees government, it will not work. These papers are controlled, these figures are controlled by human beings. That human element is the missing link in our politics. The fact that people get to power with not the ultimate purpose to develop this country, but to enrich their private interest, that is the biggest problem in this country. Otherwise, Nigeria has all the resources needed to develop this country to a 21st century country. Nigeria is one of the brightest people intellectually. Nigeria are very motivated naturally. The population is there. Our location in Africa is there. There's so many things that stand for us. But that human component, corruption and attitude to governance, those two things, if we don't fix it, these problems will be immeasurable. They'll continue. It's a recurring decimal, like I said.
All right. Dr. Sanjay, I'm always concerned, like I was talking with my colleagues here before we brought you guys on. Why is it that we always have the dregs and the ragtags of the society come to that exalted position of an executive person, either at the state or at the federal level? If you're seeking for employment, we ask for basics. Did you go to primary school? Did you go to secondary school? Are you a graduate? Are you an ND holder and all of that? And then the jobs for which you're applying for, there are specifications.
Yes.
And those specifications, I mean, you want to get a good job and you must be a graduate, for instance. But how come when it comes to elective positions, we don't put these things as benchmarks? I mean, you want to become president of Nigeria, you can afford not to have any certificate, you can afford not to go to any school. And we're going to explain the way. Why is this pattern continuing? And the political parties supposed to be called out because they are the ones who will eventually pick out a candidate and they give to us. And it's a case of you are between the devil and the blue sea. I'd like to get your take on this.
Yeah, to put that into context, as you said, the minimum requirement. In fact, when they took, I think when the president's case was in court, or even when that former Osun State aspirant, let's not call his name, was in court. So that's when the court even explained it, that it does not say you should have 5 credits or something. No, just sit for SSC.
Whether you fail,
just sit.
Whether you passed or failed is immaterial.
Just sit down.
But you have evidence
just enroll and sit for it. So it does not matter whether and have a result, because we were seeing funny results from that governorship candidate, FF, and it now said just sit. That's the basic requirement. So I think even beyond the qualifications, we have an integrity problem on the side of the politicians who are coming. Then I would like to blame the people more. We are not interrogating these people. We are being carried about by very, very basic discussions. You know, this is a circle. It's a mafia system. They know how to keep us busy with some very, very irrelevant discussions. It's from the north, it's from the south, it's a pastor, it's a Muslim. You know, so they know how to keep us. There's one particular candidate. I don't want to be sounding to be campaigning for anybody here, but there's one particular candidate of almost all of them. You see him shouting his voice out, talking about cutting cost of governance. He's giving you practical examples, and nobody has come to say it's a lie. He's lying. He has been saying this since 2016. I've watched him on the platform on various program. He comes and he tells you practically. He tells you he left 75 billion for his successor. The last successor left, and the one who can say he left just 400 million. We are talking of 75 billion. But you ask the market man, you don't hear his name in their voices, in their ears. So we are almost like, it's like we are the one encouraging. You hear people, when you hear some of these corrupt people come into, you hear people say, hey, you hear their voices, their names are on their tongues.
On their lips.
On their lips, yeah. So we've not, there's this revolution. Ask yourself, look at every indices of this Nigerian economy. It has never been this bad. Is it debt? Is it inflation? Is it unemployment? Everything is at a record high. This is the kind of economy that we should be looking at now and run away from maybe venturing in. But you have people, you have somebody telling you that come and buy from for 100 million. It means that person knows that there's something here. And you have people really paying that money. So it means both parties know that there's something here. In this economy, one of the candidates, the same candidate I talked, said there's no more money there. And that's true. There's no more money there. You are talking of debt, 40 trillion naira. That's not beans. How will you pay that? We are talking of unemployment. We are talking of GDP figures. You talked about the GDP divided by the population. I said it's less than Japan. Their debt to GDP ratio is about 230%. Very, very high. Ours is just 25%. But their GDP per man divided by the population is about $48,000. That means one person is for Japanese. Exactly. Is economically stable because their revenue is high. Look at Germany, the same thing. Germany is a producing economy. You look at all the basic, look at the car manufacturing, BMW, German, Volkswagen, Benz, Audi, Opel. You are not talking of Siemens. Germany is the strongest economy in Europe. And in the West, just after you, it's just basic reasoning, production, because they produce. So the forex, CBN does not need to ration forex when it's everywhere. You need forex. You don't need to. CBN is the sole supplier of forex now because we are dealing with oil. But when you have, you don't need to meet CBN. You go to Volkswagen, wherever they are. Sorry, I want to buy some dollars. Can you sell for me? They sell for you. So you don't need to manage the forex. You just go Siemens. Please, I need. They are even happy to sell for you because they also need naira to pay their staff. They also so there's forex everywhere. So that's the problem. It's because we have this issue that we have a shortage. So coming to corruption, I think it's left to the people, and it's sadly so. Sometimes I look at the economy, it bleeds. You almost feel like weeping for the economy because this is a country that is blessed. We have resources. Now we are importing timber. There is no timber in our bushes anymore. There was a time I was saying in the program, you have this ugedu. When you carry a timber, just one. They don't carry 2, 3, just one. They will be struggling to move. But now you have 10, 15, you want small. Somebody told us, as I was saying, there's even mango and cashew trees that they are coming to give us now. You see our door frames bringing sawdust. You put a door frame before 1 month, you are seeing dust. It's cashew and mango. That's what one forest man was saying. So our forests are empty. That's because we did not plan. Because there's so much slow, and it all comes to corruption. Because there are licenses. Before you go to the book, you have license. So the license gives you the condition. Take 1, plant 2. But because of corruption, so you have those forest guards or whatever, they say, okay, no, carry the go. So without license, you come. So the bush is empty. We are importing timber. So it's even bad enough that we are not manufacturing secondary. We are even importing primary commodities. Palm oil. We are importing everything. Beans, even our small non-oil export that we used to export has been banned. In EU currently they banned our beans. They said the toxic level is too high. We are using very old-fashioned pesticides
to preserve them.
To preserve and to grow the world has moved beyond those. US tested our beans, it was about 40% toxic level from a standard of just 6%. EU has banned our beans now. US has banned our smoked fish. Small Mexico banned our zobo. So we even having problems with that. Look at the inflation figure that was released by MBS recently now. We had inflation at food inflation 7.20, and what were they said? Tubers, potatoes, yam. So primary products we cannot even produce. We are importing what used to be our comparative advantage. Headers have driven the farmers. So and it's painful that I don't know why we are not interrogating. It's painful that we are going to rainy season now. The rains have just started. The headers have started again. Look at Plateau. They are killing them for fun. Look at, we had a protest in Ovia just recently.
Yeah.
The food producing areas of Edo State, Odigi, Odigetwe, even Igobazwan and so on, they've all run from the farm. So we are in for a serious food crisis. The international economy, there's a food crisis there. Indonesia just, day before yesterday, has banned exports of their palm oil. They are the largest exporters of palm oil. So it means now there's no palm oil. So we don't have somewhere to get from. And our own products we cannot produce because headers have driven us from. And what's so difficult in this? The government is playing politics with it. So, as you said, corruption. Why are we not getting the right people? I think it's up to us, to the people. Obama came in US, he was relatively unknown. He came in through crowdfunding. The people believed in what he was doing.
And they bought into
and they bought into it. They crowdfunded him. But let somebody come now who is a simple man, tell you this, what and what, and I say, now I'm going to be this one, never ready. You want to listen to the man who has stolen your money and has ripped you and has so much money, and he wants to, so you now idolize that person. I was just a small example. I was calling someone to wash a car, very simple car, and I noticed that first day I told him, come and wash this car. He was just, second day, third, he said, okay, I'll go tell you one time. I saw him somewhere behind, washing one Lexus, washing one big for nothing. He didn't know I was looking at him, and I was wondering, this mentality, so is the iron, is the pan still they use for making that car, is it better than this? Like this one is not drive, because
except that one is more
it's a small
maybe that one is bigger too.
Exactly, and they are not paying him better. I know colleagues who they 600. I even gave him 600. So it's just a mentality issue. We are not still ready, and that's why sometimes I say we have not. I don't know. Sorry to say, we have not suffered enough to the point where we now get angry and revenge at these people by saying, "Come or no come, we are not going to vote for." But now we are still hearing these big voices.
That's the thing. I'm concerned because I always hear people say that you can't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
All that is needed in terms of knowledge, in terms of policy initiative, in terms of systems and models, they're already available.
Yeah.
So why are we still where we are in all of this?
Yeah, the missing component there is education. In physics, there's something we call critical mass. Okay, if you want to make mayonnaise, you need eggs and some things. But there's a certain volume. You have palm oil, you have oil, and then you put some eggs inside. There's a certain volume of eggs that you can turn to produce that product. So Nigeria has a low amount of really intelligent people that can engage the real issues. On the streets, the vote of Wole Soyinka, for instance, is also equal to the vote of one woman in a village who does not understand what we call ward or local government. Okay, so democracy as designed by the West was designed around civility and education. For the first 100 years of America's freedom, they did not allow women and blacks to vote for some reason. It took about 150 years for them to allow these groups of people to vote. They believed in limited franchise, that one, you must have landed properties. You must be an economic contributor for you to be able to understand the importance of your votes. That's number one. Two, you must understand the issues. First of all, they felt women were connected to their husbands in a certain way that they will be influenced by their husbands. This means that for the first 150 years of American development, they did not allow people who do not have the grit of political issues to vote. That's number one. And so before the people could get into that discussion, the intelligent people have already gone far with the economy. Now in Nigeria, what is the percentage of people? If you want to understand, post an article on Facebook that discusses real issues.
Nobody will continue.
You will see one like,
two
and
likes.
2 comments. Then post nonsense, and then you see a bandwagon. So we do not
into millions.
Into millions. So that's critical mass. We need, and it even favors the government, the current government, for Nigerians to be ignorant. Look at our educational system, our institutions. Look at our schools. Most of them are debt traps, and so because of that, Nigerians do not have the education and the rigor intellectual rigor to assess a candidate. To sell an educated person to Nigerians.
It's difficult.
I went to a political campaign about 10 years ago, and then there was this, he's a very popular guy now, there was this guy that was doing campaign, and that was the first time I saw a typical Nigerian making sense. I'm a politician, and he was saying, I'm not going to give you people money. I came from the United Kingdom, I was an engineer, and then he showed this difference between the system in the UK and the system of Nigeria, and he said, I'm going to do my best, I cannot solve the problem. He was very articulate, gave figures and facts. In the middle of the campaign, somebody just shouted, and then leave all this talk, we share money, you speak English, all nonsense. And if you knew it, the rally went down.
And that was it.
That was it. That's an example of what a mob, an ignorant mob, can do to enthrone themselves. We have what called democracy. There's what called mobocracy. Tyranny of the majority. The majority of Nigerians are not properly educated to understand how to assess a leader. How to assess a leader. We believe in paddy politics. We are not interested in issues. You talked about Obama just now. When Obama was talking, he was in a filibuster for almost 23 hours. He was talking on television. Americans were puzzled how a man can talk for over 20 hours. Diction, semantics, grammar, and abreast with the history of America and the issues. They did not care whether he was a black man or not. TV stations around the world focused on him. Those people are very careful who they put as their number one man. He has to be one of the best. Obama has a degree, a first degree in political science, a second degree in law from Harvard University. The pedigree is there. They know that this man is going to be the face of the United States. He has to be intelligent. He has to be more intelligent than 90% of the population. But here, when you see our leaders and you look at the people, let me tell you something. A pack of lions led by a sheep is as good as nothing than a group of sheep led by a lion. That's what it means. One educated man, one well-educated man is more important in development than 1 million ignorant people. Until we get it right by installing, in fact, the educated people have to take politics by force. We should stop talking, Mr. Presley. We should stop talking. We should get into politics. Because what's happening is that it has been hijacked by a lot of ignorant people who have nothing to offer this country. We must get into politics because we understand the issues, we understand what we really need. But educated people, they are scared. You know why? They've been muzzled out of politics by the wealth of these ignorant people. And therefore, to get to politics, can you imagine? Just to expression of interest. If you're a professor in the university and you heard that the express interest in the office is 80 million, it's
100 million. 50 million, 100 million president, presidential seats, 50 million governorship, Senate 20 million, House of Reps 10 million, House of Assembly 2 million, 2.5 million. Then on the other side, 50 million, 40 million. It's crazy.
I understand that politics everywhere in the world is expensive, so we should not be emotional about it.
Everything is going up. Price. Everything is going up.
Yeah, of course.
So price of funds should go up. What do you think?
Yes, that's what they say. But in developed countries, even policy is expensive. That's not the real issue. The issue is mobilization. How many people can have the ability to mobilize? Are you going to mobilize these people who do not even believe in these issues? In developed countries, it's expensive. Everywhere in the world, policy is expensive. Okay. Sometimes in American election takes close to $10 billion to it's expensive.
Yeah, but does this justify the form sales at the cost of 100 million naira?
In Nigeria, like I told you, our government is extractive. In an extractive economy, everything makes sense. When you begin to see that everything is a matter of collecting money from people without looking at value. We are not interested in governance, in real governance. We are not interested in paddy, like I said, my person. You are going to see the next election now. You know, we talk about Nigerian issues every time. Sometimes I just get frustrated. There was one time I said I will not say anything about Nigeria again. Just watch us go to play out. Those intelligent people that you saw that are discussing the issues, they will just put them in the corner. And then you see people from nowhere. Just because, just have discussion with people on the street. I already know the people that are going to come out in the politics. I already know where it will end up. It's the same old. Because one, they are billionaires. Two, they have a lot of paddy interests. They are networked. They have impoverished the people so bad that with only 500 naira they can buy a person to their side. Absolutely. So those are the issues. Until we educate our people enough to get that critical mass of thinkers who can take this government by force, not through arms, but through intellectual discourse, then this country will make headway in the political front. But as long as we keep miseducating the people, we keep not taking care of our education, we keep treating education with kid gloves, we are going to be having ignorant population continuously. And in the next 50 years, we are going to be 400 million and 300 million ignorant people who will put more ignorant leaders in power. And so the cycle continues.
Dr. Saze, let's get your final words on this conversation, particularly as it relates to the 2023 election, because I'm seeing new entrants into the political space aspiring to be president of this country. The list keeps growing by the day. Whether they are serious or they're just there to make the numbers and perhaps use it as an opportunity to negotiate for position and stuff like that. I don't know, but what's your take?
Yes, I think very, very, very straight to the point. I think Nigerians, we have talked about political education. We have to become more politically conscious. Interrogate. Don't just listen to good English. I was telling somebody, one of the candidates on APC, he just knows how to speak good English. But what is the person saying about the economy? Let's now start asking, what's your plan about inflation? How do you plan to tackle it? Don't just tell us, I'll bring inflation to 13%. This is our budget, budgeted on 13% inflation. This is April. Inflation is going up. Meanwhile, our budget is 13%. It rose from 15.63 to 15.7 is 15.9. So now with diesel and other costs, we are looking at 16. So don't just listen to them. I'll listen to one and say, I will fight this insecurity. How? Tell us practical steps. I will reduce unemployment. How? Tell us practical steps. How you would do it, what arrangements you would make, which companies. Don't just build castles in the air. Which company are you going to talk to? What is going to be the carrot that you would dangle at that company coming to make it fine for them to come and invest? All these companies that have left, Michelin, Dunlop, ShopRite just left last year. Almost all this, the country is almost empty. It's just churches and small crusade centers. Almost every big land now is a campground. Look at Niger State. It's about 76 kilometers, square miles wide. As a larger Niger, there are some countries, Netherlands, Belgium, they are just 30. Look at Israel. When you look at Israel on the map, it's just a strip. It's strip. They are one of the largest producers of apple. Look at Netherlands, half the size of Niger State. 120 billion was their exports for just last year, 120 billion. Our exports is not up to 5% of that. We have been running trade deficit for the last 10 years. So there are so many things to talk about. Interrogate these leaders on each unemployment, inflation. How will you take us out of this, our poverty level that we are? Insecurity is big. There's a correlation between inflation and insecurity because things are tough. So that's why insecurity is thriving. So on a final note, let's ask questions. Then when we identify those that we think don't mean well for us, we've seen their legacies. We've seen it.
Yeah.
We've talked about one who is Mekano sole proprietor. We've talked about let's not go into detail. But when they call us to the stadiums, let's leave the stadiums empty. You hear that somebody is coming. You see the stadium, they are fighting, they are struggling to enter. Why? Because it's at the world level.
Yeah.
So you have, I've attended some world meetings. They say they never bring money come on. They say maybe by tomorrow morning they will bring money come on and we won't address that. Until that money comes, they won't enter that bus. Because buses, they use this long Shomala bus, they call it, to take people to the stadium. At the work, they were complaining. They said, no, we never bring money. We now go. They say, draw an address. Money will come tomorrow. So we shouldn't be allowing these people mobilize. If you believe in somebody, you don't have to wait for somebody to give you money.
But
so we should leave
in the poverty level, isn't that a factor?
It's terrible.
These guys have been pauperized to the point that they don't have an identity anymore. They just want to find a way to survive.
I acknowledge that. It's not like a case of who blinks first.
Yeah.
Do we wait for a good leader to come before we become strong, or do we bear with the hunger and be first, then just bone these guys and let them call us to the stadium we are banned? So it's neither here nor there. It's a poverty situation. That's why with 5,000 they can buy. But I think that's what we call a revolution. Revolution not necessarily means go to the street. Hong Kong, the revolution was done by a 17-year-old. It doesn't necessarily mean go to the street and fight. You can have a revolution. People go on hunger strike. So I think if we have suffered enough, we should bear this hunger. It's hitting everybody. And let them call us to the stadium and let them talk to themselves. let's abandon the stadium.
Talk to themselves in the stadium.
Let them talk to themselves. It will be a shame. He won't come back again. But by the time we go and load the stadiums up, and so I think it's still with the people.
Okay.
We have to have a change in our mentality.
Yeah, I strongly believe the people are not victims of their problems. They are complicit when they choose the wrong leaders. So we should stop crying for good governance when we are not willing to install good governance. So like Mr. said, the people should be responsible for their leaders and stop blaming the leaders for not doing well when they have installed them in power. So the PVC is very important. Come 2023, people should vote the real, true, effective leaders.
Okay, I'm just hoping that some of the presidential aspirants can go to our YouTube channel, our YouTube page, and get this interview, learn from the views and perspectives canvassed here by two economists, Dr. Sazer Yoha, as well as Destiny Owobu. It will do you a lot of good, so you don't go to campaign grounds and talk babadash. I mean, you have some substance to really give out there. That's what the media is there for, to set agenda and give you a guide on the pulse of the people so you can actually put your ass together and do the needful. At the moment, Nigeria is in a parlous state if you go by the trends and the circumstances of our existence. But unfortunately, the country is more than blessed, more than enough resources that can really, put us on the trajectory. Maybe some other day, we'll look at how other countries are doing it, calling off the bluff of the West and Europe. I mean, Russia is doing that. Yeah. Several African countries are doing that. Why can't we do that? Is it that we are lily-livered or we're scared? With all the resources that is at our disposal, with all the human capital at our disposal, why is this difficult? Well, I want to say big thanks to our panelist, Destiny Owobu. Thank you. It's always a delight to have you here, Dr. Sazer. Anytime you guys come, you just bring it on in a very special and unique way. We'll take a short break. We'll be back with you with the rest of the program with my colleagues. Don't go away.